As we gather this day, we take a moment to center ourselves in the word of prayer. Holy One, the psalmist cries out, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, who is our strength and our Redeemer." Amen. As we come this day, we have lots on our agendas. In terms of coming to church and the busyness that occupies our life, and coming into this sanctuary with all of the thoughts of the day. And then going downstairs where we know we have our annual congregational meeting for the receiving of the program booklet, where we talk about what's happening in church life and with finances, where we have a meal together and get to know each other a little more intimately. We each have those things that we come into this space with today, knowing that we want to get them done, personally and in the life of this community. We pause and we listen. We listen to a word that is spoken over us, a word that is spoken for us. It is a time in which we open our ears, we open our hearts to orient or reorient ourselves and our lives. It is a time in which we listen to how God breaks into our lives and into the world. And we pause and listen. We wonder about this prophet, Nehemiah, the people coming home, and this priest Ezra lifting up the word, a word that brought the people to tears. We listen to the voices of the Psalms, calling us, claiming us, inviting us to see God's word as cosmic around us, in the tent of the heavens that is set over the sun, in the very ground of the earth, in our speaking, and in the meditations of our hearts. We hear this word from Paul, in which we are called together to be community, intimately connected, as body parts, one to another, needing each other, caring for each other, perhaps protecting the most vulnerable or private of those among us. And then we hear of God's word spoken, a word passed from the prophet Isaiah throughout the generations to the Hebrew people, and now landing in the lap of Jesus, who stands and reads these words, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and the Lord has anointed me, to bring good news to the poor, to lift up the brokenhearted, to set the captives free." These words are given to Jesus. And he speaks them there in the community that he has known so well, being brought up there in Nazareth. And then, interestingly, at the end, there's this wonderful tagline that Jesus speaks to the community. Today, these words are fulfilled in your hearing. Are we listening? Today, these words are fulfilled. Perhaps some of you tuned in to the inauguration and the promises that were made, the commitments, the oaths, the vows. But wrapped within there was a prophetic voice, a witness, a poet from New Hampshire, openly gay, speaking a word of witness for who we are and yet who we can be. His title, One Today. does it mean for today, this time, for us to live in a new way of being? Jesus is saying that's what he is about then and there in Nazareth. But it's also opening the vision, the mind, the hope, and the wonderings of the people of Israel. To say, what is possible? What can yet be? One thing that I think is fascinating in this Gospel of Luke are the ties that this writer continues to make throughout. Now imagine with me for a moment growing up in a small town, and maybe some of you other, I'm going to say guys out there, have experienced this also, that there was a derogatory term thrown around when you were a little guy, perhaps. That you might be called a mama's boy. Oh, you mama's boy. Run home and tell mama, right? That might be a derogatory term thrown around at some people. Yet it's fascinating to me here in the Gospel of Luke that the idea of being mama's boy is lifted up and celebrated. For you see, this idea of releasing the captive and caring for the oppressed and the poor, of sheltering those in greatest need, is not something unique to Jesus, but we have heard it here in this sanctuary just a little over a month ago in the voice of a woman named Mary, as her Magnificat is sung out from this Gospel of Luke, as we talk about who she is and how she is planted in this particular community. And now the witness that has been carried out throughout the generations from Hannah on to Mary is now passed on to a son who takes the words that have been passed on from Isaiah throughout the generations to him, about how community is going to function, about how those who have been put on the margins are going to be welcomed back in, about those who have been imprisoned physically, emotionally, psychologically, are going to be brought back into community, how a new year, a new day is going to take hold. What a celebration! And Jesus saying, today these words are fulfilled in your hearing. Imagine him almost thumbing the nose at those who would decry the mama boys and say, that's me. I have been given this incredible gift, both from my mother and from my father, from all of those who have gone before me, and am calling you now to pay attention to who we are to be as a community. This past week, I attended a clergy event with Isaiah to talk about who we might be as a community. How we might think about health care as Minnesota looks at the national program that is being established, but also at what we already have here in our state. And how we are going to make sure that seniors and children don't fall off in the healthcare system as it comes into being, but rather that we care for one another. We talked about transportation, and to make sure that as they look at where buses and light rail goes, that it doesn't bypass neighborhoods where there is significant ethnic or socioeconomic diversity, but rather that they are cared for, we are cared for, that no one is left behind.